Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Rant Radio. This is the Carcast after USC's 27-20 win over the LSU Tigers in Las Vegas. It's the first Carcast of the year. I'm your host, Mike Castillo, joined along with my co-host in the Rancho Studio in Los Angeles, Alicia Artola.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Welcome to everybody joining us in the chat. Lots of things going on. Lots of. Oh my God, we can tackle. I'm crying. Says Aaron. The Dirty Workers says, and Miller Moss is as advertised in all caps. What a game, says Touchdown USC. Alicia, I think people are just a wee bit excited about USC beating LSU in the final seconds, the dying seconds, if you will. Woody Marks scampering into the end zone when it looked like SC was trying to just kill clock to set up a game-winning field goal from Lance. It ends up being 6 points for the Trojans in the end zone and a victory in week one.
Yeah, I turned to you before that play, before Woody Marks ran in for the touchdown, and I said, if USC sets up a field goal and Clay Helton's kicker is the one who misses it, and USC loses, I will lose it myself. And thank God we didn't have to deal with that because Woody is goody. I'm workshopping this line.
There you go.
I'm here for it. Woody is goody.
He's off the marks.
He's off the marks.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. On the mark.
He is on the mark.
Yeah.
But he's off the marks like a track meet thing.
Yes, he's off to the races. And I mean, just to sum up that game, you and I were in the fourth quarter before USC goes down and scores. You and I were looking at each other and going, even if USC loses this game, I feel good about this game. I feel good about the performance. I was ready to talk about 2011 Stanford. If USC lost because LSU scored at the end, or it went to overtime and USC lost.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have to talk about that because USC came through. And I think that there are two talking points from this game. There's a lot of things to say about this game. Oh my God, there's a lot of things to say. But there are two big talking points. Two reasons why USC won. Number one is Miller Moss.
Yeah.
Miller Moss is him. Like, anyone who's been listening to this podcast for the last few years knows I was highly skeptical of Miller Moss as a starting quarterback for USC, as a viable starting quarterback for USC.
Mm-hmm.
The Holiday Bowl got my head turning, and it got me thinking, like, maybe he does have it. Maybe he does have a little bit of Drew Brees in him. And despite maybe not having the big arm, like, he can just be that guy.
Yeah.
And then you learn his story, and he's a Trojan, and he stuck around, and he chose not to transfer because he was committed to being at USC and living out his childhood dream. And that convinced me that, like, okay, even if Miller Moss isn't the guy, I'm going to root for Miller Moss to be that guy. I want him to be that guy. And then he goes out and does what he just did. That performance from Miller Moss was absolutely spectacular. Even when things were going wrong for USC, even when it looked like USC's offense couldn't move the ball, Miller kept his cool. He was doing what he could behind an offensive line that was getting worked, and we're going to talk about them shortly. But when it came down to it, in a 2-minute situation, in a win it or lose it situation, he calmly and assuredly just moved USC down the field like it was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It was shades of Matt Leinart, and I don't want to go crazy with any of this yet.
Sam Darnold,
but it was shades. But it wasn't even Sam Darnold, because it wasn't. There was no Caleb Williams or Sam Darnold of, like, this is a spectacular athlete doing spectacular things,
right?
And, like, that's why he's great. Like, this was just somebody who, cool, calm, collected, has that vibe to him, just driving down the field, looking like the guy, looking like nothing's ever going to get him down. And he's just going to, if you put the ball in his hand at the end of the game, he's going to find a way to get it done. So Miller Moss is that guy. And I'll certainly let you chime in with thoughts on Miller Moss, but the secondary point, the number two thing that just has to be said out front, USC's defense. My God, I didn't expect that. I expected USC's defense to be better. but marginally better. That defense was absolutely transformed in every single facet. Like tackling, pursuit, recognition, hitting, getting off blocks. I know that they were playing soft coverage, but like it felt like they were doing that on purpose and not because they didn't know where they were supposed to be.
Hot damn, that defense.
The defense won USC the game.
Yeah.
The defense saved USC every time USC's offense failed to score. And every time I went, well, here we go. Like if they score, it's over. The defense came through. Like was that the best you've seen the defense look since 2013?
Since 2013.
Maybe 2017. I'll give that defense some respect because that was a good defense.
But, LSU, the talk all week was that LSU was going to run the ball down SC's throat. Will Campbell talked about it. That they didn't come to go to Caesars. They came for a fight. We're going to run the ball. Those were the big talking points. And SC held LSU to 117 rushing yards, 4.5 yards per carry, and that includes a 39-yard run. You take out the 39-yard run, LSU was about 3 yards per carry. At one point, it was 3.1. I need to run those numbers again, but it was about 3 yards per carry, with the exception of the one long run. And SC didn't give up chunk plays, barring that one long run. They didn't. How many times did they force LSU to settle for a field goal? Twice on those drives, including at the end of the game. On the very first drive of the game, they force a fourth down stop. And then you look at the quarters. In the fourth quarter alone, LSU averaged 5.1 yards per play, which was down from 9 yards per play in the third quarter. The second drive that LSU had in the third quarter, where they ran it down SC's throat. The one time that they had really success on the run, running the ball. And after that, SC responded with 3 and outs, and then bending and not breaking on the last drive.
LSU was 5 of 13 on third down.
Yeah. LSU ran, averaged 9.7 yards per carry in the third quarter alone. In the fourth quarter, they averaged less than a yard. Less than a yard per carry on the ground. That's what SC held LSU, the team that was going to run it down SC's throat. That's all the talk was all week. That did not happen. Now, on the other side of the ball, we can talk about the SC offensive line. I thought the SC offensive line had a disaster showing, and we can get to that later.
Had 7 tackles for loss.
Yeah, like that was a problem. That was a place where SC absolutely lost the line. But that did not happen on defense. And I think it's more damning for LSU that it happened that way, because this was LSU's, veteran offensive line. 2 potential All-American candidates on the offensive line, 2 guys who could be all SEC on that offensive line. You could argue this might end up being the best offensive line SC will face all year, and they held them to less than a yard per carry in the fourth quarter. You can argue that Nussmeier in the passing game might be the best passing attack that SC will face all year, and SC allowed them to have 2 touchdowns. 2. This was a game where if SC's defense was playing, SC's defense from last year was in this game, the game would have got out of hand in the third quarter.
Oh, absolutely. Because they wouldn't have gotten any of those stops.
Yeah.
It would have just been LSU driving down the field and putting this game away, and LSU ends up winning it, 37 to 21 or whatever. And we were talking about how it was closer than it looked, but in the end, USC's defense would have broken, and they would have lost composure. And I think that's the thing that I find most impressive about this USC defense, because in that third quarter, it felt like late in that third quarter, early in the fourth quarter, I was texting people saying the defense looks tired. Like they look like they're getting overwhelmed, and I was ready for them to fall back into where they were last season, where the moment the dam broke, then it would just, they were done.
Yeah.
And instead they refocused and re-energized and got Braylon Shelby getting that big tackle for loss after USC had to punt. I think it was after USC punt. Getting that big stop, it just it rejuvenated the defense. And I cannot speak more highly of D'Anton Lynn and how he got D'Anton Lynn and this whole defensive coaching staff, because there was a point during the game where I was like, this is the best linebacker play that USC has had since 2013.
They were tackling.
And I was sitting there going damn, Matt Entz, big ups to Matt Entz, because USC's linebackers have been playing well below their talent for years and years and years now. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like actually Mason Cobb looks like the linebacker that USC brought in as a transfer. Eric Gentry looks like an actual linebacker who can function consistently in this offense. Quite frankly, I thought Easton Mascarenas-Arnold was the weakest of USC's linebackers, and it's not like he had a poor game. It's just I think he got caught out a couple times. But
he wasn't the guy who was very productive, but I don't know that he was playing poorly. It was no. I thought Cobb really showed out, like you said. I think the thing that I think fans want to see all the time is development, progression, somebody to get better, right? This is a thing that we talked about for a decade, that defensive players never looked like they got better. Offensive players too. Look at all the times SC quarterbacks have been great in year one and then progressed as they gone on. It happened to Kessler, it happened to Darnold, it happened to Slovis. It happens over and over and over again, right? And in this game, I think you saw the development of a lot of guys on both sides of the ball, defensively especially, when you look at guys like Mason Cobb, who looked incredible. He gets the pick at the end.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things about this game was Gentry gets 2 tackles for loss and a pass breakup. SC only had 3 tackles for loss in this game, and yet they held LSU's rushing attack that strongly, which tells you it was a bunch of ones and twos and twos and zeros.
They were stuffing.
And they didn't need to get the TFLs. And last year and the year before, they had a ton of TFLs. But what did they have to show for it? Nothing, because they gave up a lot of chunk plays. And you look at what LSU was able to do in this game, in terms of big plays. I've got the numbers right here. They had 4 runs of 10 plus yards. That was 12, 10, 39, and 10. And 6 passing plays of 15 plus. Not a single only one of them was over 30 yards. It was a 41-yard pass in the fourth quarter. That's unheard of. Remember last year when we were doing over-under lines and you talked about 20-yard gains? And you put the line at 10 or something.
12. No, I think it was 12 or 14.
LSU had 3 in this game.
Yeah.
3. That's how you win on defense, is being able to play the numbers. And I know that people were frustrated that the secondary was playing off in the first half and Garrett Nussmeier was able to sort of dink and dunk underneath and move the ball that way. But you're telling me it didn't work? It absolutely worked.
And this is what I was saying earlier. It's the soft coverage felt like it was by design, because the idea was, we're not going to let these guys beat us. We're going to keep everything in front of us, and we're going to tackle in the open field and get stops because of it. And that's exactly what USC did. Yes, there was certainly, they played softer than I would prefer. I'm sure certainly than D'Anton Lynn would even prefer, but it worked because they were playing soft, and then they were going down and tackling in the open field.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just, I want to highlight.
They were tackling in the open
field. They were tackling in the open field. I want to highlight Kamari Ramsey, because what a damn player that guy is. My God, I am sorry, UCLA. I am sorry, not sorry, because Kamari Ramsey is a dog, and he's going to be a hell of a Trojan over the next couple of years. But it wasn't just Kamari Ramsey. It was guys who were missing tackles left and right last year too. Mason Cobb was out there. I can't wait to get a look at the missed tackles numbers, because I can't remember more than 2 or 3. And usually they were the kind, there are going to be missed tackles in a game. There are going to be times where you have to give props to the opposing team. There was a missed tackle by Easton Mascarenas-Arnold where I just thought the tight end did a really good job of sneaking outside. And, John Emery is a really good running back. And so him breaking some tackles is going to happen. But like, dudes were out there making the tackles in a way that we have not seen from guys who were missing tackles constantly. Eric Gentry, Mason Cobb, like Jalen Smith has always been a good tackler, but he was out there making those plays. Like it was just so refreshing. It was so, like I forgot what it was like to watch a USC defense that I didn't have to hold my breath and expect a player making a catch out in the flat to get an extra 15 yards because the first man to him wasn't going to be enough.
Yeah. The Iron Cats here on YouTube says, I love you too. I love the
Cheers.
Trojans, and I love tackling with the super chat. Tim and LA
Also,
coming in with the super chat as well.
Also, 300 GJW, absolutely super game. Kamari Ramsey is real with the super chat. Thank you, Skilk with the super chat. Has there been a super chat since the USC season started? No, but now there have been. What a night for it. This is a celebration, guys. This is a celebration. I am loath to use the term USC is back, but unlike past really fun, good wins for USC, where it felt like the offense was doing all the work and the defense was barely holding on, it feels closer to USC being back, quote unquote back, because of the defensive performance, because of the defensive transformation. And it's not just a result, because USC has had defensive performances where they've held teams to limited amount of points. I mean, Oregon State a couple years ago comes to mind. Like there have been good defensive performances, but it relied on turnovers. It relied on
there was only one turnover, and it was the final play of the game.
Ender. Yeah. This defense got stops because they got off the field on third down. This defense got stops because they made tackles and they didn't give up easy yards. And by the way, this defense got stops despite getting next to no pressure on a quarterback who I have to give it up to Garrett Nussmeier. LSU has a dude there. Like Miller Moss had his moment, and I'm so happy for Miller Moss, but like it sucks for Garrett Nussmeier that he had to lose that game, because dude's a baller. He will tear apart defenses that give him time, and USC gave him time and they paid for it. But that's what makes the stops that USC got even more impressive, because they weren't creating havoc and they still got stops. Like, when was the last time the USC defense did that without getting a million sacks and forcing fumbles and turnovers and everything like that to swing momentum, instead of just simply making a stop on third down?
You know what it was? It was like what the Wilcox defense was supposed to be.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Because the Wilcox defense was bend, don't break, but they still broke.
Yes.
And when SC was winning games in 2014 and 15, they would get their stop every now and then, absolutely, but they would break more than you would like. And I remember there was the time in 2015 where they were struggling to get any pressure, and they were trying to like add like twists and stunts in the middle of game weeks because they couldn't get any pressure. This team, like you said, didn't get a lot of pressure tonight. It didn't matter because they were still able to make all the other stops. Yeah, they were playing off in the secondary. They gave up 304 yards to Garrett Nussmeier, making his first regular season start. Yeah, that's not great, but it didn't matter because those were yards that were just sort of empty calories. They made LSU work really hard in the red zone, and it won SC the game, because if LSU scores on the first drive, that's 7 more points that they have. If they score on any of those drives, they have to settle for field goals. They win the game. Any of those things. And the defense, like you said, bought time for the offense to sort of come through and, ultimately win it at the end, 27-20. Big shout out to Steven who popped in with a super chat as well. Tim in LA said, should have done a big super chat instead of betting the over 1-0. Yeah, it did hit the under. Speaking of unders, I know we don't like to like spoil the mandatory over under game, But you and I in the middle of the game were talking about the Mason Taylor catches.
Yeah.
The line was at 7.5. And in the third quarter, you're like, oh, he's getting that easily. And we looked it up and it was the 7th catch.
And they didn't give him another one.
He had exactly 7.
Yeah.
So that drive, the drive in the third quarter that LSU scores the touchdown on, the one where Emory looked incredible with the 39-yard run, and then they started it with the pass to Mason Taylor. Nothing after that. Emory, after that 39-yard run, had like 19 yards or something like that. Like it was nothing after. These are Emory's yards tonight. 3 yards, 39, 10, 3, 6, 4, -5, -1, 0, and 2. His last 4 carries, he had a grand total of -4 yards. And that was a guy who gashed SC in the third quarter
and an offensive
line, they were going to run away with the game for a second.
And an offensive line that had declared before the game that they wanted to essentially run the ball down USC's throat.
Mm-hmm.
And they could not. They had to rely on their quarterback.
Yeah.
Slinging it. And I think that if you're LSU and you see the way Nussmeier is, you got to feel good about that. But we talked about how LSU's running game last year was heavily predicated on having a running quarterback, and that he accounted for so many of their yards that like they might not be that strong of a running team this year, and that it would be interesting to see what they did on that front.
Yeah.
And despite this heralded offensive line, USC's defensive line stood up to the task. And more importantly to me, USC's linebackers stood up to the task. And it was so nice to see what was ultimately a muted defensive line performance, where it wasn't Bear Alexander getting into the backfield. It wasn't Anthony Lucas creating havoc. Although, as I want to give credit to I saved this tweet from Scott Daloisio. I'm sorry. Daloisio. I'm going to get it right.
Oh boy.
There's just a lot of vowels and my brain is all over the place. Emory Jones was holding all night. I mean, Anthony Lucas was getting mauled for large periods of this game. And, that holding was just simply not called. And it was just one of those things. So I think maybe USC might have gotten a little bit more pressure if that wasn't the case, but that was what they were working with. So on a night when, like, from a statistical perspective, you can't point to a strong defensive line performance, I thought it was actually a strong defensive line performance because they did the job that needed to be done, which is, and this is something USC hasn't been able to do on defensive line or linebacker front, is they ate up the space that they needed to eat up. They held their ground and let the linebackers make plays. So to me, it was an extremely successful debut from Gavin Meyer and from who am I blanking on? Nate Clifton. Nate Clifton, Gavin Meyer, 2 guys who were not the most heralded guys out of the transfer portal, but the thing that we could say about them is that they were veteran interior linemen with a lot of playing experience, with a lot of strength, and that's what they did. They went in there and they looked like veteran defensive linemen who were big enough and strong enough to just hold their ground when they needed to and let everybody else around them do the job. And part of me wonders if this explains why the Bear Alexander conversation has been what it is. Because I think that Bear Alexander is a supremely talented athlete at that position. But what Danton Lynn and Eric Henderson need from that position are players like Nate Clifton and Gavin Meyer who do the job, who don't give ground. And what you want to see from Bear Alexander is to master that element and then add his explosiveness and then add his ability to get into the backfield. But until he can do the job that Gavin Meyer and Nate Clifton did in this game, I'm with Eric Henderson. Those guys got the job done.
Yeah.
Let them keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, SC getting in so many good performances from the transfers on defense, I think, bodes well. Look at 2022, right? That there were so many transfers on offense that really helped turn everything around offensively. It wasn't just Caleb Williams. There were a lot of transfers on offense that turned things around. Now there's a lot of transfers on defense that are doing the same thing, which sort of reminds me that if you're talking about transferring and changing things, You can change with Mint Mobile. Have you thought about that? Alicia, they got this deal right now where you can get 3-month plans for only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. You can just go to mintmobile.com and move easily. You bring your own phone, just like those players brought their own game to SC's defense, right? Kamari Ramsey was balling at UCLA. He brings his game over to SC. With Mint Mobile, you take your phone that you have and you go to your new place, Mint Mobile. You can use your own phone, bring your own phone number, all your existing contacts, find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile. Get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month to get this new service offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month. Go to mintmobile.com/Troy. That's mintmobile.com/Troy. Cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/Troy. $45 upfront is required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on the first 3-month plans only. Speed slower than 40 gigs on the limited plan. Additional taxes and fees and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Alicia, I want to go back to talking about the offense here, talking about Miller Moss. You asked me earlier my thoughts about Miller Moss, and I didn't really expand on that.
Yeah.
So you pointed out that you thought it was like Leinart in his cool, calm, and collectedness, and less so Darnold or Caleb Williams, because he didn't have to make a wow play. He didn't have to improvise. And I agree. There was, you look back at the win against Texas in 2017, Darnold has the jump pass, right?
Yeah.
And then against Penn State, he throws the incredible super pass that you've never seen a better pass in your life. And you've seen it with Caleb Williams against Arizona. He just willed SC to that win last year in overtime. Miller Moss didn't have to be perfect in this game, but by not being perfect, he was perfect. Does that make sense? Like he didn't have to be superhuman. He just was within himself. And I think that, when you look back at the quarterbacks who I think that we can say are similar to Miller Moss stylistically, your Kesslers, your Barkleys, your John David Booties, what was the thing that those guys were missing? It was the ability to grab the team by the scruff of the neck and get that last-minute drive done, even without the wow factor plays, right? Yeah. And that's what Miller Moss was able to do tonight, because I remember being at Stanford Stadium in 2012, and Matt Barkley had a chance to win the Cyrus Hobby game in the last minute, didn't do it. Cody Kessler had many a game where he had a chance to win it in the last minute and didn't do it, because it's hard to do that.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing. And I think it's very impressive for Miller Moss to do that in his first start as a starting quarterback. This is not his first start. He started in the Holiday Bowl, but this was his first start as a starting quarterback. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Calix Rose in the chat says a little like Sanchez. Yeah, I can see that. I still go back to thinking about Sanchez. I can't think of a game in which Sanchez, maybe the Arizona game in 2007, I think was a game in which he showed some moxie at the end, but it's not like a game where he had to pull it out of the bag. He had the game in his first start at Oregon that he threw a pick on the last drive, and it was one of those like good showing games in that game against Oregon on the road at Autzen in 2007. And this game could have been like that for SC, a game where I think you and I were ready to get on the Carcast and say that, yeah, SC lost the game, but it sort of, not that it doesn't matter, but more so like the biggest takeaways are that they're going to be pretty good this year, and that's more important than what happened in tonight's game. But Miller Moss drove the team down the field. Yeah. Woody Marks jumped over Elijah Page and ran into the end zone.
And Kyron Hudson, your dude, I gotta give you props, because you were championing Kyron Hudson all off season.
Yeah,
you had the prediction that he would be USC's leading receiver, and he was USC's leading receiver in this game. He had two of, if there are a better 2 catches than that one-handed catch and that targeting catch this season, then let's go, because
Yeah.
Kyron Hudson, there were catches that he left on the field, and I do want to give credit to the defensive back who was doing a very good job of disrupting the catch after the ball was in his hands and batting it out. Maybe work on strengthening those hands up a little bit.
Yeah.
But then he goes and makes a one-handed catch, and he makes a catch despite getting absolutely demolished in the face.
Yeah.
So like he can obviously do but those are two of the biggest catches that anyone will make all season. He is a veteran, unheralded, who has stepped seamlessly into the Taj Washington role of being that guy that nobody is expecting, and then he just goes out and makes the damn catches. And then also, just because I have to get this in here, Lake McCree, baby. Lake McCree
was
baby.
incredible. Yeah.
Tight end up the seam, baby. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Or as somewhere I have
He makes me drool.
There you go. Cam in the chat says everyone talked about the 4 sophomores, and although they did well, everyone forgot about Kyron Ware Hudson. He was tired of getting looked over, and he had those 2 incredible catches. And I think that the interesting thing that made his game, I think, sort of more potent at the end was that catch on the last drive. But this was one of those games where it looked a little like Tyler Vaughn's. And Tyler Vaughn's had a knack for making incredible catches.
Also random
and
drops.
then he would drop one on 3rd down, and you're like, well, hold on. You just made this incredible catch 3 seconds ago. Kyron Hudson looked like he was on path for having one of those games, and then his 4th quarter was mega. So, like, he didn't let himself, be deterred by those things, and sort of had the amnesia that a cornerback is supposed to have.
Yeah.
Which is really great. Graham in the chat says, in the spirit of Vegas, couldn't find a meter. Here's $4.99 and sent us a super chat. Thank you, Graham.
We also got another super chat from 300 GJW, just trying to do the tongue tying thing with the GJW, and we missed a chip shot field goal and still won. Yeah. And didn't need a chip shot field goal at the end. But I want to stay talking about the receivers, because there was a lot of talk about this receiving core and its strength and its depth, and who would be emerging as the main guys. And obviously Zachariah Branch was the talk of the offseason, and he had his moments in this game. He didn't take it over, but he certainly had his moments, and he contributed massively to the victory. But the stat lines of this receiving core are something that I think USC fans should be very excited about, because Kyron Hudson has 5 catches, 83 yards. Lake McCree has 5 catches, 56 yards. Those are the bread and butter guys. Those are the guys that Miller Moss in a pinch is going to when he just needs to get the ball out. Jacoby Lane, 3 catches, 50 yards, 1 touchdown. Great catch, by the way. Great throw for Miller Moss on the free play, but really nice catch to adjust his body downfield to get that touchdown. Well earned. Deuce Robinson, quiet game, but still 2 catches, 49 yards. Big, meaningful catches that move USC down the field. Mekhi Lemon, only 1 catch, but it was a huge one, moving USC down the field quickly. And also, I want to say I saw Mekhi Lemon out there often blocking downfield, doing that dirty work that you love to see from wide receivers. Just that group there, nobody, I mean, Kyron Hudson, obviously it's his game from the receiving perspective, but there's a balance there. There's a USC can find a big play from anywhere in this receiving core from top to bottom. That's wonderful to see. You can imagine, we've talked about this before, you can imagine this is the Kyron Hudson game. Next week is the Mekhi Lemon game. The week after is the Deuce Robinson game. The week after is Jacoby Lane game. Like, they're going to be trading off, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and I think that unlike, say, 2007, which I keep bringing up again, that was a year in which there wasn't the number 1 receiver, and Fred Davis ended up being the guy. You had Vidal Hazelton, you had the original Rojo, all those guys, but it was the tight end that stepped up, right? And I think this could end up similar in that sense that, Lake McCree tied with Kyron Hudson for the most catches in this game with 5. But I think the difference is all the other dudes had a moment where they stood out. And I think that this is a great week 1 game because of that. In that, I hate to sound like an old person who just brings up old games, but do you remember the 2006 game at Arkansas? SC won 50-16.
Yes.
If you look up the box score of that game in the running game, it was one of those second halves where they gave there were a whole bunch of new running backs. Chauncey Washington was finally a starter, right?
Yeah.
You had a whole bunch of new freshmen like Stephon Johnson, Emmanuel Moody. I think it was Broderick Green there.
There was
CJ Gable.
There was the famous photo from camp where all of them, there were like 7 of them in a line, and all of them were in line to potentially be a starter.
Yeah, because of the stable, right?
Yeah, the stable. It was Gable, Washington, Broderick Green, or there's just a bunch of them.
All those dudes in 2006 at Arkansas. Go look up the box score of that game. The fourth quarter was incredible because everybody was able to get in, and they all showed something. And I remember as a kid watching that game, and it was like watching the coming attractions.
Yes.
Oh man, this Emmanuel Moody kid, he's got spunk, right? Oh man, Chauncey looks good. This whole thing, you didn't need to see 30 carries and 130 yards from each of those guys to see their impact and see what they could do. And you look at the box score, and someone in the chat pointed out that the box score for the receivers is beautiful. And you look at it, it's the same way. It's the same way. Mm-hmm. It's coming attractions. Deuce Robinson, 2 catches, 49 yards. I think you would have liked more before the game if you heard those numbers.
Michael Flores points out he drew a huge PI.
Yeah, but he had a big impact.
Yes.
His catch was huge before the half, right? It was before the half, I think.
Yeah.
I
think it's his catch that sets up the field goal attempt that USC misses.
Kyle Ford had a 38-yard catch in which he intercepted the ball, essentially, because it was going to go to Zachariah Branch. He intercepts it.
It wasn't going to go to Zachariah Branch. It was going to go to an LSU defender. That's fair. He intercepted an LSU defender.
Yeah. And, he has this big moment. You talked about Mekhi Lemon, showing his thing and did stuff. Jacoby Lane, I thought had a quiet night, but 3 catches, 50 yards, 28 yard gain was his long.
Also drew PI.
Drew penalties. He did have the really bad penalty early on in the game that cost SC points.
Yeah.
But he came back from it. Just like Kyron Hudson, that didn't tank their game, right? And I think that is super, super positive for the Trojans going forward. A couple more super chats that we got here. You guys are awesome. Funny IMC says, was that a game or what? Fight on SC. Absolutely. Hell of a game, hell of a week 1. SJ says, at what point of the game did you think, okay, the SC defense is different this year?
It felt like it almost immediately. There was in the first, I can't wait to rewatch this game, guys. In the first quarter, I think in the first drive, there was a hit that somebody made that it was like, oh, they're pursuing different, they're hitting different.
Yeah.
But I think it was after the first quarter, because there was a little bend but don't breakiness. There was we've seen USC's defense getting stops in the past, and then it still breaks open. And then there was just a point in the second quarter where they were just making tackles immediately in the open field and getting off the field. And like I said, this is night and day. The vibe, the feel, the approach, the preparation, everything about this defense felt completely like they had completely wiped away all of the stink of last season.
Mm-hmm.
That stink didn't stick on anybody who remained,
and
it didn't infect anybody who arrived the way that it did the year before and the year before and the year before. Just you guys know, you watched the game. It felt different. It just felt different straight away.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can think of a moment, Michael, but
I think there's 2 moments. It's the first drive. Yeah, they give up like what was it? I'm pulling up the drive thing right now. 13
they
plays,
get
74 yards.
They get the third down stop, and then they give up the fourth down, and that's frustrating.
They get 2 third down stops and a fourth down stop on that drive. And I think that there was a tone there. On that first drive, they stopped the run. They laid the foundation for what they were going to do the rest of the game, which is make LSU throw the football instead. And yeah, they gave up a lot of yards that way, but they bent, they didn't break. And I think it showed some validity to why maybe playing off has its benefits. You just let them run out of steam, gain empty calorie yards that way.
Force the opponent to be perfect, to be extremely efficient. In college football,
that's hard.
It's actually very difficult to be extremely efficient. Yeah. And USC was dealing with a quarterback that I found to be an extremely efficient quarterback. Yeah. And he still ended up in a situation where his team was 5 of 13 and inefficient on third down because you force them to have to string together a bunch of plays where everybody doesn't make a mistake.
You know what it's like? And that's it. I hate to be this person who just brings up games of yesteryear. Is it not 2004 Cal where Aaron Rodgers strings together 23 straight passes?
Yes.
And they only scored 16 points.
And that
it didn't matter.
Extremely rare to have a quarterback string together that many passes.
Right.
And you end up in a situation where, LSU he's stringing together passes. He's looking great, but then he misses one.
Right.
And then they're behind. They're off schedule, or
he throws a little out route and SC gets the tackle because they're tackling well,
and they only get a couple yards from it, and so then they're off schedule, or they try to have him do a little rollout and he can't execute the throw because it's hard to it's hard to throw on the run as it turns out.
I did want to go back to SJ's question about my point for when the defense was because I said there's 2 points. The first one is that first drive. The second one for real is the fourth quarter. Like, it's how SC responded on defense to getting punched in the face. We've talked about this before. How do you respond when you get punched in the face? Well, they gave up a 7-play, 78-yard drive for LSU to take the lead in that third quarter. And like we said, last year's defense, that would have been the crumbling point, and then they would have given up 4 straight touchdown drives. The offense never gets the chance to come back in the game. All that. They respond with 5 plays and out, 3 and outs, and then forcing LSU to settle for a field goal on the last drive of the game. The game, but their potential game-winning drive, right? That response is all you need to know about this defense, because it would have been very easy to capitulate there. Super easy to do it. We've seen it many times over, and they didn't do it. And I don't like banking too much stuff on week 1, and we've talked about it before. The idea of the Stanford game was always the false positive.
Yeah, and we said going in this game,
this game could be nothing, right? And I think I will say,
I have thoughts on that.
Well, as big of a deal as it is for SC to get the win, I want to emphasize what you said about you and I talking before that last drive. We were ready to come on the Carcast and say all these things anyways.
Moral victories, yeah.
Yeah, like moral victories are like, circle jerky. But like, there was a lot of things to take away. If SC loses this game 23-20 because LSU hits a final second field goal, we're getting in here and we're saying all the same things.
Yeah.
We're saying all the same things. And I think that's where like what happened on the score line doesn't matter in the sense of like, I think the bigger story is that SC proved that they were better on defense, and they showed a lot of mettle on offense to get through a game where the offensive line was getting jiggle-bagged for a lot of the time, right? But they still found a way to outgain them, put up 447 yards of total offense,
and clear the way for a game-winning touchdown
on the ground, which they couldn't really do all game long. Yeah, so they obviously wins matter, obviously all of that, but I think that there's so many more things to feel good about from a week 1 performance.
Yes.
And does this not give you a lot more hope going into Ann Arbor?
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm still very concerned about Michigan's defensive front against this offensive line, and I worry that Miller Moss magic may not be able to withstand that particular matchup nightmare. But I want to say something about the concept that this game, we said, win or lose, not to invest too much into this game because week one, because we don't know how good these teams are, anything like that.
Yeah.
I was saying that from the perspective that I very much believed that this would likely end up being a bit of a shootout where LSU and USC are both in the 30s, if not pushing the 40s, where both defenses are trying valiantly and showing improvement, but still getting beat.
Yeah.
And so then
that's not what happened.
It was going to be a game where it was like, well, that's slight improvement, but how much improvement is it? And what is it? What does it mean? And LSU's defense isn't that good anyways. And USC's offense, is, we don't know what the matchup was or anything like that. LSU could have put up a bunch of points and it wouldn't have meant that USC's defense is bad this year, all of that. What we got instead was a narrative busting performance.
Yeah.
Where, USC's offense, we need to see much more efficiency. We need to see much, much better offensive line play.
Yeah.
We need to see USC being able to establish the run much more clearly. There's a lot to clean up offensively. But the offense got the job done in a moment where they needed to, and it showed Miller Moss has something. Miller Moss has it.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, the big, big, big thing is USC's defense demonstratively looked better.
Yeah.
Not just better, but legitimately good against an offense that we have talked about. There are not many offenses that are going to be better than LSU's. Brian Kelly, whatever you think about him, is a good offensive coach.
Yeah.
And we saw tonight Garrett Nussmeier is a hell of a quarterback. And we saw tonight that that Karen Lacey is a hell of a receiver. And Mason Taylor is a hell of a tight end. Yeah. And this offense is going to put up points on a lot of teams. And we watched football all weekend and saw the quarterback play in the Big Ten. Garrett Nussmeier, if he was in the Big Ten, would probably be the best, if not the second best quarterback in the conference.
Well,
he is probably the best quarterback USC will face this season.
Like you look at we watched all the games, right? We watched all the big games at least, right? I thought this was the best game of the week, like legitimately. If you were neutral, how is this not the best game of the week? Yeah. Like, okay, maybe Abilene Christian, Texas Tech, but we didn't watch that, right? You know what I mean? Like, this was the best game of the week. It was a ranked matchup, and it came through. And I think one of the things about a week one performance is that you expect them to be sloppy. You expect them to be turnover filled, penalty filled, all that sort of thing. And yeah, LSU had 10 penalties, SC had 6, but this game was not your typical week one game. It was not, there was one turnover, and it was the last play of the game, a desperation drive. For all intents and purposes, those barely count, right? Like,
yeah.
This was not a crappy, like, you look at, we watched the Notre Dame Texas A&M game. That was ugly. It was so painful to watch that game. I just wanted to play video games.
Yeah.
I didn't want to watch Riley Leonard run for his life for another 5 minutes. Like, there was, all of it was just ugly and defensive and with no glimmer of hope for anybody on offense. And it was just gross. It was gross to watch. Florida looked disgusting when they played Miami. Oregon moved the ball a ton. And got a bunch of yards, but they weren't getting into the end zone.
They were completely
right?
inefficient, like we talked about.
Yeah,
Michigan was.
They struggled.
I mean, if you're a Michigan fan today, you are definitely looking at that performance, saying like it's going to be okay because that was just a sloppy first game.
Yeah, but this was a game where LSU came to play. I think LSU was legitimately impressive and better than I thought they would be.
LSU should feel very good about their defense.
Yeah, and like. SC, I think, played a lot better than I thought they could be in a lot of different ways. Like, this was legitimately a a great game to watch, great performances. There was nobody that played poorly, save for maybe the SC offensive line.
Yeah.
Like Version Best in the chat says it felt like a playoff game. It did. It really did feel like a dramatic playoff game. Now the downside becomes, can SC play on short rest after putting up all of that effort into this one and then go and play Bryson Barnes on Saturday on short rest?
I'm going to go out on a limb. And say that I think USC will be fine against Utah State.
Famous last words.
But the question is, what will USC do against the rest of the schedule? And I love this comment from the Angry Trojan. It's funny, everyone who said USC is soft from the SEC is in hiding. ESPN folks all picked against USC and are currently MIA. It's not just the SEC people.
Yeah.
The narrative on the Pac-12 teams coming into the Big Ten was they're soft. They can't go toe-to-toe with the physicality of the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Was that not a physical game that USC? I mean, I'm not gonna, cape for the offensive line or anything like that, because the offensive line is definitely a weak point.
Right.
But the physicality of this game, USC's defensive line was physical. USC's linebackers were physical. USC's safeties were physical. USC's receivers were physical.
But in the Big Ten, you could win with having a good defense and an offense that
scores 27 points.
That is maybe flawed, and this offense has a big flaw in the offensive line.
Yes,
and I think that pays. Like that, you're going to tell me that SC's offensive line is better than, say, Iowa's?
The fact of the matter is that we have to give some credit to LSU. Harold Perkins is an All-American candidate. Dude was awesome. They were I think they have a lot of talent on defense. We didn't doubt their talent on defense. We questioned replacing guys, being settled in, first game of the season.
I thought their defensive game plan was great.
Yeah.
All the pressure that Baker brought was great.
Blake Baker did a really good job of making it very difficult for USC. But the fact of the matter is that USC in the Big Ten, with a quarterback like Miller Moss, who keeps his cool even when he's getting, smoked with pressure, and a running back like Woody Marks, who will eke out the yards that he can find, and the receivers that USC has who will make the tough catches and be available for the quarterback, you can work. Now, can you win a national title with this offensive line? No, I don't think you can. Can you win the Big Ten title with this offensive line? I don't know about that. But you can certainly win a hell of a lot of games by just managing what's going on up front, especially knowing that talent-wise, I don't think you're going to be Michigan, Notre Dame, certainly those defensive fronts are going to be a big challenge, a big problem.
Absolutely.
But talent-wise, I think LSU is probably up there with that caliber of team, as opposed to the Minnesotas and the Marylands of the world.
Yeah, and SC just showed they can win a dogfight.
Yes, they can win a dogfight, and that's the big thing. I was always
Lincoln Riley doesn't win big games, right?
No, but 7-1 against the spread all time when he's been an underdog. The narrative about USC not being able to handle the Big Ten always annoyed me, because USC's whole history is literally one of going to the Rose Bowl and handling Big Ten teams. USC, it's just been disrespectful the entire time to teams like Utah and Stanford and Oregon and Washington, acting like those weren't teams that were hard-nosed football teams at their peak, who would challenge you in the trenches and make it very difficult. USC has dealt with this before. USC has dealt with this a lot more than anybody realizes. And USC has failed at times because USC wasn't up to the task. And that was an individual USC problem, individual team coaching problem.
Yeah.
And what feels so great about this particular win is what we saw was Lincoln Riley's offense with the right quarterback can get the job done when they need it.
Mm-hmm.
And Danton Lynn's defense can be transformative. I can't go back. I can't say it enough. The vibes on defense are different.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. Dudes are hitting harder, tackling surer, in position to make plays. The linebacker play, I know I said this a couple times, but the linebacker play. Like USC's linebackers weren't a liability tonight. USC's linebackers were not a liability tonight.
Mm-hmm.
USC's linebackers were a strength tonight.
What a world. It's 2008 all over again. Hey.
I mean, like I said, I think this was arguably the most, in terms of vibes, in terms of surety, one of the best defensive performances since 2013. Yeah, this team hit like those Pete Carroll defenses.
Yeah. It was absolutely a hell of a defensive performance. Hokey P in the chat says, please pay the D coordinator whatever he wants. You and I were talking about this during the game. Danton Lynn, if SC's defense does ultimately, like the season plays out like it did for UCLA last year, with the defense legitimately is a top 10 defense, like if that happened, he's gone. Like, you just need to make sure that you clone his brain but before that happens. And luckily for the Trojans, when you look at the rest of the defensive staff, Henderson, Entz,
I promote
Belk,
Entz to DC, and just
all those guys were overqualified. We talked about.
Yes.
So like, I think that is a good thing. And also, it's insane to say this after one game.
I know.
But
we don't want.
But how can you not?
But that's the thing, is like, if USC defensively, if USC plays like they did tonight, USC will have a chance against Michigan. I'm not saying they're going to beat Michigan in the Big House, but Michigan's offense, this defense can stop that offense.
LSU's offense is 3 times as good as Michigan's offense.
And better than Penn State's offense. So again, if the defense is keeping USC in games, then
Michigan's defensive line is even better than LSU's, though, and that's going to be a problem.
And that's the thing, is from a seasonal growth sort of perspective.
Yeah.
You want the defense to start fast and to just be what it is, which hopefully this is what it is. But from an offensive perspective, this is the thing we talk about. Like, don't listen to what they say in fall camp where they talk about how the defense is doing so well and everything like that, because the defense is always doing better than the offense early on, because offenses are so much more complicated in terms of like having plays, having the playbook down and the rhythm and all this kind of stuff. It's just difficult to have your offense really be a well-oiled machine early in the season. So the hope would be that this is the offense. This was an offense that is still working through growing pains.
Yeah.
This is an offensive line that is still working through growing pains, and that you want to see this offense get a little bit better, a little bit more seasoned, a little bit more confident in what they do as the season progresses. Now, Michigan is probably way too early for this offense to start paying off against a defensive line that is as good as Michigan's, against a defense that is as good as
Mason
Michigan's.
Graham is right there. Yeah.
But then you're talking a couple more weeks. And Penn State's defense is very good. Penn State's defense is going to be a challenge for the offense. But at home, and with Miller Moss being what he was in this game, you're feeling better about that. And then you progress, and then you end up in the October-November slate where USC can roll through some of these teams and get to a Notre Dame team that will have one of the better defenses that USC plays all season. And is USC's offense fully realized by that point?
Could be.
USC suddenly has a chance in that game. Like, we did our season predictions, and you and I both had USC going. Well, did we both have 9-3, or
we both had 9-3?
Yeah. And those losses were to Notre Dame and Michigan, and I had LSU before I flip-flopped to before this game. But like, those losses felt like, certainly Michigan felt certain. And now, I'm not predicting it, trying not to overreact that much. But now you look at it and like, no, with a defense that's playing that is capable of a performance like this, USC will be in more games than we thought they would be.
I actually think this is a case of optimistic, Alicia.
Before the game, Antonio Morales asked the question of what kind of defensive improvement would be a success, would feel like a success to you, USC fans.
Yeah.
USC averaged 34 yards per game allowed. What number would you put to say that USC had successfully transformed the defense? And I argued for 24, even though that's a lot. 10 points of improvement in 1 year is a lot. But my argument was 26 points per game would be sort of middling in college football last year. So I suspect it'll be middling in college football this year. And then you account for the Big Ten offenses and the quarterbacks not being quite as good as USC faced last year. And I get down to 24. Well, USC just held an LSU team that is going to be one of the better offenses in the SEC.
Yeah.
To 20 points.
Yeah, they're not going to be as good as they were last year because they don't have Jaden Daniels, but
no, but they'll still be one of the better.
They're still going to be absolutely very potent. Yeah. Yeah,
and so we have talked many times about like the concept of a 20-point defense, and that being the ultimate goal for USC defensively. Like, get to a point where you're sub 20 points and you're going to be a contender. You're going to win 11 games a season. This looked like a 20-point defense tonight. Again, they need to keep it up. They need to show that they can withstand the rigors of the wear and tear of a season, that this isn't just a one-off situation, that maybe LSU is worse than we thought on offense, all that kind of stuff. But this looked like the men on the field looked like people who are capable of a 20-point defense. And if USC has a 20-point defense, the danger games that we looked at as being potential upsets are far less dangerous. And the really tough games that USC we considered coin flips, it's not just 50-50 anymore.
Yeah, you talk about a 20-point defense. I pulled up last year's scoring defenses. James Madison, 11-2. They allowed 19.5 points per game. Florida State went undefeated before getting absolutely gabble-dirked by Georgia in the playoffs. The bowl games, because they didn't make the playoff, right?
Yeah. But losing Jordan Travis
19.3 yards per game, points per game. Mind you, that's heavily affected by the Georgia game.
Yeah.
Alabama made the playoff, 19 points. Texas made the playoff, 18.9. UCLA was 18.4, better than all those. So, I'm not going to sit here and predict that that's where SC is going to be, but if they can be in that realm, they're going to win a lot of games.
This is the first time we've looked at a USC defense in many, many years, and I've even been able to dream of that, of this level of defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get to the mailbag and take a quick break for our friends listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all that, big shout out to Hokey P, top Trojan fan.
Being top Trojan fan.
Coming through in just the absolute clutch. Thank you.
Is this not what you needed after watching Virginia Tech on Saturday? Is this not not the perfect palate cleanser for a Virginia Tech grad?
Yeah, he writes, make sure you guys subscribe. Rod is only getting better with time. Also, USC is fully backed, and I won't hear otherwise. So it's going to be a good time. Yeah, he doesn't have to call on the Rant Line and say, why can't we just win a game? Because SC won a game. This is a perfect reminder. Get your calls into the Rant Line, 818-643-7227. That is the phone number. Load up the thing with a whole bunch of raves for the rave line. But let's get to the mailbag, shall we?
You've got mail.
All right, let's start with Rama Murdy, who says, can someone tell Kirk Herbstreit how to pronounce Danton Lynn's name? I cannot tell you how much this drives me nuts. It's not only Kirk Herbstreit. First of all, Kirk Herbstreit saying Danton Lynn and then Reese Davis immediately saying Danton 3 seconds later was whiplash.
Here's what I don't understand, though. I watched Game Day on Saturday, and I made a note of how everybody else said D'Anton or Danton, and Kirk said Danton Lynn. He said it right on Saturday. So what happened, Kirk?
It drives me nuts because it's like Kamala Harris, and I'm not getting political, so calm down for anyone who's going to get upset about that. But like how so many people don't pronounce her name correctly with the Kamala thing.
Yeah.
It's Kamala. And like to the point where like I start doubting myself before I say the name out loud. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. It is Danton, right? Yes, it's Danton. Like,
It's
be
Danton.
confident in yourself,
Danton.
Michael. It's Danton. It's Danton Lynn. Like,
Danton Lynn.
like Canton, Ohio.
Canton Lynn. Not
Canton, Ohio.
Canton or
Danton Lynn.
Oregon. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Danton Lynn. Danton. It's like the yogurt, but just put a T in there.
Yes.
Danton. Yeah. The Angry Trojan says, was Gentry the defensive player of the game?
You know what I love?
You can make an argument for a lot of
I'm
things.
struggling with who the defensive player of the game was, and it's not because I'm short on names, which has been the case for a long time. I thought Kamari Ramsey was immense. I thought Mason Cobb was outstanding. I thought Eric Gentry was fully realized, which is so great to see. Any one of those three, I would feel very strongly about giving it to them.
Yeah. I think you can make the argument for a lot of dudes.
I think I go Mason Cobb. But again, any of them, I'll hear the argument for sure.
Yeah, I think you can give it to a lot of dudes. I think you collectively give it to the defensive line for just what they were able to do in rush defense.
Michael Flores says Jalen Smith.
He had a great game.
I'm not arguing it. A
lot of dudes.
By all means.
A lot of dudes you can make the argument for.
Yeah.
On offense, I think it's easy to just it's Miller Moss. It's Miller Moss. I think that we talked about it earlier that there's a lot of dudes in the receiving corps that had their moment. Absolutely. Kyron Hudson. You can say that this is the Kyron Hudson game. It probably is. It should be. But I think you still got to give it to Miller Moss. Is sort of the guy.
Since you are big on hyping up national high school champion Narbonne, two-time CF champion.
Yeah.
I want to point out what Craig in the chat says. 818 representing Moss, Ramsey, Jalen Smith, Alamany dudes. My mom used to work at Alamany. I basically grew up at Alamany. 818 representing. 818 for life, baby.
Here you go. There you go. And Makai Lemon from Los Alamitos had 22 catches, and we are not going to talk about what Los Alamitos did to Narbonne on Friday night.
That was.
We're not discussing.
Oh boy.
We're not discussing it.
Yeah.
I still hold that Narbonne doesn't have a football team anymore. All right. Let's go to Cameron. Is optimistic Alicia or pessimistic Alicia here about the defense? It's definitely.
I actually think this is a case of optimistic Alicia.
I have never been more optimistic about USC's defense in the time we've been doing this podcast. This is the most effusive I've ever been able to be about USC's defense. And there have been occasions where I've been able to be very excited about USC's defense. But I'm telling you, those dudes, something was different.
Yeah. Completely different team. Hokey P in the chat says, do you guys realize that we just beat the number 13 LSU Tigers that's coming off of a 10-3 season? I think this is the best USC game in a decade.
This is a good team. LSU is going to be a competitive team.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're a playoff team because I don't know the SEC is just, there's a lot of teams that are in that range, but this could be a playoff team.
Yeah.
This is not a false victory. To me, like this is real. Yeah, this was impressive. This was real. It's
best game in a decade. I think that's probably a little overstated. Obviously,
all right.
You think of the Washington game
since 2014,
the Penn State game. Obviously,
I think the Penn State Rose Bowl. Just because if you think about like the Penn State Rose Bowl, the 2017 Rose Bowl, that team had some like NFL dudes on that team.
Yeah.
That was a very, very good team.
Right.
And I mean, I have thoughts about James Franklin and his ability to coach that team and take them to the next level. That's fine. But that was a super, super impressive win.
Are people forgetting the 2020, the win over Arizona on the road?
In 2020,
That was a late win.
I am forgetting. Yes, Michael, I am forgetting the 2020
It was
win
it was
over
a dramatic
Arizona.
late win.
I've forgotten a lot about that year.
I think in terms of
This was more impressive to me than the 2016 Washington win, simply because that era of Washington team was never going to challenge USC in the same way that LSU was going to be capable of challenging USC in the trenches. And I mean, it was very impressive going on the road. More impressive being, in Washington as opposed to a neutral site, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's more impressive to go on the road and beat an SEC team that won 11 games last year, even with Jaden Daniels. But they're doing okay at quarterback, is my assessment.
Yeah, they're pretty good. Let's go to
as Hokie P, Top Trojan fan says, this team didn't let their opponent score 28 unanswered points. So
that's true. Remember when Penn State scored on 4 or 5 straight touches of the ball?
Yeah, but it was USC needs to figure this particular thing out. Is the bookending the halves? Penn State was bookending halves in that game.
This is, let's go to a question from Rowan Murray about how concerned should we be about the offensive line play. Barry, I think Barry is the key here, because especially when you look at Michigan coming up in 3 weeks, that is a game that I think on offense, I think you feel even worse than you did last week because of what the line struggled tonight. I feel Michigan's line is better.
I feel better in one sense, in that
defensively.
Is Miller Moss capable of doing the thing where he goes into the big house and puts in a performance? Yes,
he's not going to be scared.
I do think he will not be scared. But Michigan's defensive front is licking their chops right now, and USC has a couple weeks now to figure it out with this offensive line. And because I'm feeling optimistic. The optimistic thing I will say on that front is, again, this is an offensive line with a lot of first-time starters, or first-time starting the season starters.
Yes.
People who players who are not seasoned or are not like seasoned veterans.
Right.
Every week that goes by, in theory, they can get closer to where they need to be. And if over the next, 3 weeks until that game?
Yeah.
If over the next, with the bye weeks, if they get 3 weeks better, will they be in a position to dominate Michigan's in the trenches? Absolutely not. Will they potentially, hopefully, be in a position where they can buy Miller Moss just enough time to do what he did tonight?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe.
And they showed there's ways to circumvent that.
Yes.
I think they really tried with the zone read stuff, but it didn't work.
And I think that Lincoln Riley now has a better understanding of what he can and can't ask of his offensive line.
Yes. I think that when you're talking about the offensive line being concerning too, I would rather have SC's offensive line be concerning and expect them to be able to like feel comfortable in the thought that the offense could grow into the season than if it was the other way around.
Yes.
Because if the defense got blown off of the line like the offensive line did tonight, it would be hard to sit here and say, well, yeah, like I have the faith that they will turn it around by the Penn State game in the middle of October. But you can sit here and say that the offense probably will find a way to maybe not have the offensive line be great, but find a way to maybe circumvent that. And that is the key. That is the key to circumvent the offensive issues, right? Or the offensive line issues. Absolutely. Funny on MC says, Alicia, aren't you glad that you flip-flopped, picked SC to win?
Here's the funny thing. I flip-flopped not for the reasons USC won. I flip-flopped because I thought maybe LSU's defense won't be drastically improved from last year. And maybe USC will simply be able to outscore them. Like, that's why I flip-flopped, because I was like, you know what? I'm going to put my faith in Miller Moss and Lincoln Riley. When it came down to it, I flip-flopped because I asked myself, whose offense do you trust more, Lincoln Riley or Brian Kelly's? And I said Lincoln Riley's. So I flip-flopped. As it turned out, it was Danton Lynn.
Yeah.
It was Danton Lynn. So good. I'm very pleased. As I always say, no one is happier to be wrong when they pick USC to lose than I am. And I'm happy to be right this time because I flipped. So
Simone says, has anyone tweeted maybe LSU should have backed out?
I have not seen that tweet. I think in the background that tweet may have been arranged to be sent out by our friends over at Travel Hates Thursdays. That is a gold tweet. I did see I saved a tweet. I don't remember who it was, Heather something, who tweeted I guess they were in the Trojan horse or something like that. Yeah, because the hype video that USC put out, which was awesome, got me so hyped. But there was a lot of discussion, and I know you feel a certain way about it, where it starts out with a battlefield, like a Trojan on a battlefield, and it zooms through a Trojan horse that has soldiers inside of it. And then the inside of the Trojan horse becomes the inside of an airplane. And then USC's players are in the airplane, and then they jump out, and it's this whole thing. The problem with that being, as some of you have no doubt either knew or have heard, is that the Trojan horse
was why the Trojans got wiped out.
Was a trick played by the Greeks. The Greeks made it seem like they had left and gone away, and that they had left an offering for their journey to the gods to safeguard their journey back home, but they had hidden all the soldiers inside the giant horse that they had constructed. And when the Trojans brought that horse into the city, the Greek soldiers jumped out and killed everybody. So like, it was the thing that undid the Trojans. But I am fully on board with the idea that USC is reclaiming the Trojan horse motif and saying, you know what?
Claiming it like it was a slur.
I mean, the Greeks used it. Well, guess what? When somebody does a trick play against you and it works, maybe you adopt that trick play yourself and say, hey, that worked really well. Let's try it ourselves. And that's, I thought the video was amazing. The rule of cool is in play. I'm not going to overthink the mythology behind any of the imagery in it. Yeah. I just thought it was really cool.
A lot of people in the chat say the video was good. Comment says it was incredible, and also who cares about historical accuracy. Angry Trojan said it was dope. Hokey P says it was dope, and Angela says it was fiction.
Angela Henry, this is a good point too. Like, it's not historical accuracy unless you're referring to unless you are trying to claim. Now we're just getting really pedantic. Unless you're trying to claim that the story of the Iliad, the mythology of the Iliad is a historical, is like a historical piece of fiction. But and then it's historical accuracy about whether or not you are correctly portraying what happened in that piece of mythology, in that piece of fiction.
But the Iliad being based on history is no different than Game of Thrones being based on history, because it is based on history, but it's not a literal story. It's still fiction.
Well, I mean, all of those, these are oral histories.
Star Wars based on history. Yeah, right?
These are oral histories that are passed down and then narratively woven together. Yeah. Even the structure and story of the Iliad that we have, the Odyssey, the Iliad, the Aeneid, all of these are not even like.
Can you tell she was a classics major?
I was a classics major. Yes, they're not even the full. Like, they are folklore that was then written down by somebody eventually. Mm-hmm. So like, even that story will have been transformed from when it first started being told and written in a way that was to suit the author of that story, which is always the way that myth and legend and all that is whoever writes it down is writing it down in a way that is suiting whatever narrative that they were intending to tell at the time. And a lot of times there was political stuff behind all that, blah, blah, whatever. The point being is that USC can claim the damn Trojan horse if USC wants to.
Okay. I think the video was badass for two reasons. One, it just looked cool.
Yes.
It looked really cool. And B, and this is my actual truly biggest gripe about the video, the heavy metal version of Tribute to Troy was so kick-ass.
Badass.
We needed more than 5 seconds of that.
Yeah.
It's like, as soon as you realize what it is, you're like, holy crap, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, since when did Black Sabbath cover Tribute to Troy? Like, this is incredible. And then all of a sudden it like cuts to the modern stuff. It's like, whoa, no, go back. I wanted the other stuff. But the thing that I didn't care for the video is that, and it ain't that deep thing, but I thought the horse was corny, and I don't understand the points of the paratrooping part. Like, I guess they didn't have parachutes, right? So they weren't paratroopers. But like, what? What?
Again,
what?
we don't need.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, it was like AI made the video. Like, but
yes,
it was actually well made. Like, they all had 5 fingers, and it wasn't like AI just put like 2 heads on people.
That video was made possible by AI. I can already tell you that. But like, yeah, it's a very cool video. And again, this is like,
it was like a dream.
It's
like,
a dream.
You have dreams that are like, this
sequence.
is
heavy.
bad shit.
It's heavy on imagery. Also, it's a hype video. We don't need to do a like. Do we need to do a YouTube video where we do like a deep breakdown and psychoanalysis of the USC hype video for the start of the season?
Probably not.
Do we need to get into the literary imagery and the imagery of the interior of a Trojan horse and the interior of a plane? Do we need to get into the literal reference to the plane travel that USC is going to be doing in the Big Ten, and the parachuting that's going to happen when USC plays at home and they bring in the paratroopers like they do every year? Like, do we need to analyze the size of the paratrooper Trojan who landed in the middle of the Coliseum and looked like he was probably 50 feet tall?
Trent says it was a cool way to go to war, Michael. It was. It was very cool. S. Resden gave us a super chat. Thank you. We appreciate you. Is it me, or is Miller a much better leader than Cody, Sam, or even Caleb?
Okay.
I think this is a slippery slope.
Yes. I don't want to draw a conclusion about leadership because we are not there.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that Caleb Williams wouldn't have won this game with the defense like that. You can't tell me Caleb Williams wouldn't have won a ton of games with a defense like that.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot that you can go into questions of leadership and who's a better leader for what team or whatever. What I will say is that Miller Moss has clearly gained immense respect across the USC roster, across the USC coaching staff, and has instilled a level of belief in them, of self-belief, but belief in him. I think you get the feeling when people talk about Miller Moss that Miller is somebody that they all look at and have supreme confidence that when he takes the field, that he's going to be able to get the job done. And I think that Caleb had that vibe to him in the Caleb way of it. But this is different kind of leadership, not better or worse. Caleb was I think a leader who instilled confidence because he's a freak of nature who is capable of literally of miracles,
right?
And magic on the football field. Miller's style of leadership in that sense is obviously going to be different because he's a different person, a different quarterback.
Yeah.
But the point there is that you need to have a quarterback that when he steps onto the field, the players around him know that he is capable of getting the job done and he will do it. And I think Caleb instilled that level of confidence, and it feels like Miller instills that level of confidence too. And that's what, when you talk about it factor, to me, like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's some guys just have that vibe and some guys don't. And
yeah, I have a hard time talking about anyone's ability to lead.
Yeah.
Because like you said, we're not in the room. This is why I don't like talking about who the team captains are, because people always have really strong opinions about who the team captains are. And like, I think those are things that are just easy to talk about, but from the outside, but doesn't necessarily mean anything. Yeah, we talked about earlier that Miller Moss was able to lead a last minute drive, unlike Cody Kessler and Matt Barkley and all those guys. But I don't think that makes him a better leader. Those aren't one for ones. The other thing is, I think questioning Caleb Williams' ability to lead is buying into all the bullshit about Caleb Williams, about his nails, about how he cried after a game, after he's toxic, he's a prima donna. All of that was bullshit. None of it was real. Like, it was all distraction BS. The people in the NFL are learning that now, that it was all BS, right? Like, so I think sitting here and talking about Caleb's lack of leadership, or like in comparison, saying that Miller is a better leader, is just like giving all that stuff validity.
Yeah.
Don't let that stuff have any sort of value. Like Trent says, the Bears seem to buy into Caleb's leadership. Exactly.
Caleb's, we can just say, not that we need to have the Caleb Williams discussion again, but Caleb Williams' leadership was not the problem at any point over the last 2 years. That was not the issue. Miller Moss would have lost most of the games that Caleb Williams lost last year because, again, the defense.
Yeah.
But so, like, again, it's not, I don't want to like compare them in a way that is degrading to one or the other. I do want to compare them in the way that the vibes are there in the qualities that you need from a quarterback to win a lot of football games. I think both of them bring it. And I think that's a luxury. There was a question in the chat about from the Angry Trojan. Do you think the quarterback who shall not be named and has not fully committed to USC, do you think he should finally shut it down? I'll name him. Julian Lewis is committed to USC, but there's just been chatter the whole way through that he could flip.
I don't think Miller matters.
If I'm Julian Lewis, again, I still want to play in a Lincoln Riley offense.
Yeah.
The only worry I think you should have about Julian Lewis
is if he comes.
If he looks at USC and thinks Miller Moss isn't leaving, and he's not going to start as a true freshman as a result. Like, that's the only issue, which, by the way, if that's his thought process, then fare thee well.
Realistically, like, if Miller Moss being very good is the reason to scare him away, then I think that says more about Julian Lewis than it does about Miller Moss. And the other thing is, and if he wants early playing time, then more power to him. That's the world that we live in now, right? But Miller Moss is 1 year here. Next year, if he comes back, he adds one more season, and then he's gone.
Yeah.
It's it. It's not like he's taking away Lewis's ability to, do anything. That's like he will still have at least 2 years to be able to still go early to the NFL. And
the way I see it is if Julian Lewis doesn't want to come play for USC, then that's a Julian Lewis problem.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. Angry Trojan says it can be argued that nobody's media team is better than SC's media team. Yeah, do you see the stuff that our friend Keely Yours put out this week about Henderson? That was great.
Keely is awesome.
She's pretty good.
She's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
She's pretty great at what she does, and she's also a kick-ass person.
Yeah.
The social media team, they've invested in that, and you can tell they do a lot of work, and a lot of that work is really good. especially that hype video.
I do think it's funny that this was the best produced video that SC has had since your favorite Passion video.
Passion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Since that video. And it came out the day SC plays LSU. Isn't that ironic? Given that, remember, SC had the big splash hire of the LSU video guys a couple years ago.
Yep.
In 2020, the COVID season.
Yep.
And nothing came of that.
They were producing some good videos, but none.
But they both left pretty quickly.
There was really no impact, but this video went viral across national stuff. It was pretty good. But we got a question before we probably start wrapping it up. But we got a question from Cam Life. Why were the DBs playing so soft on third down? I can't wait till we shore that up. Honestly, it felt tactical to me. You don't want them to be that soft, but it felt like they were just very concerned about LSU getting in over the top, and that they decided that they would rather keep things in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, when you look at the results of the game, that strategy paid off. I think that most of the quarterbacks that USC plays this year will not be as capable of standing in and finding those gaps in the zone, and punishing USC for that. So I don't think it's the worst. It's the worst approach. We've talked before about Rafa Benitez, the former Liverpool manager, a former Chelsea manager too.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, Chelsea legend.
The way that he talked about defending is a too small blanket.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to decide, are you going to cover your head when you're sleeping and leave your toes exposed, or are you going to cover your feet and leave your head exposed? And that is what defending is. And so anytime that you see a team giving something up, the problem with USC's defense the last 2 years is that they were basically using a washcloth as a towel, as a blanket, and giving literally everything up deep underneath everything. What I liked about this setup was it was very clear that the too small blanket, they had decided they were going to put it over their head and leave their toes exposed. And that was fine because they didn't give up the explosive plays, and they forced LSU to have to be extremely efficient, and eventually that efficiency ran out. So I think it works. I would like for USC to, as the season progresses, what I think you want to see from a USC perspective is that if they go out with that strategy and teams are tearing them up and they're not getting stops behind the sticks, adjusting, tightening if they need to, mixing it up. But in this game, it worked. So you don't. I think you continue.
LSU was 5 of 13 on third down, 1 of 2 on fourth downs, and both of those fourth down attempts were on the first drive. One of which saves SC up to 7 points. Right. I think it worked. I think it worked. The game plan was very clear to not get beat over the top, keep everything in front of you, shade over the top, and tackle underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And SC being good tacklers allows that to work.
Yes.
If they were not good tacklers, this would be a problem.
Like last year when they would try this kind of thing, it was a problem because they weren't getting those tackles underneath and they were giving up all those.
Like how many times did LSU complete a pass on third down that was short?
Yeah. And
they were tackled short. And if that's what gets you the stops, that's what gets you the stops.
And Hammer Time in the chat says, I'm okay with the cushion, but 10 to 12 yards seem like a lot. Couldn't they just sit him 5 to 7 yards? I do think it will be very interesting to see what kind of cushion USC gives other teams, because LSU does have a receiving core that there's talent there and there's speed there. There's a lot of really quick guys. And I think that maybe this was specifically, maybe it was an opponent situation. Maybe we will, and again, we don't know. We'll see what happens. But USC won't be seeing many receiving cores that are have as many danger men as this one does. So maybe we will see something slightly different when they're playing teams that don't have quite as much ability to take the top off of the defense. But again, I'm just speculating. We will definitely see. This might just be a feature of Lynn's defense that you got to have to sort of like grit your teeth against and hope that it continues to work.
Yeah, I just pulled up LSU's third downs. You know how many times they completed a pass and was tackled short on third down? There you go.
How many times were they tackled short on third down?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say...
on a completed pass.
On a completed pass, I'm going to say 5.
5. Yeah, I think that validates the cushion for me.
Yeah.
They were keeping everything in front and tackling those. Because if those 5 end up being first downs... If even half of those are first downs, if it's 2 or 3 of those are first downs, that's the game completely changes. So
yeah.
I think it validates the whole thing, and I think we'll see adjustments as they go. I think we go back to the thing that we talked about before. This is probably going to be the best passing attack SC faces for a while.
Now USC
maybe Penn State can be better passing wise.
Yeah,
maybe
Drew Aller by that point. We'll see. He does have a live arm, so
that Maryland wants to throw the ball, but they've got
and there will be
stuff.
There will be other challenges too, because I think Michigan and Notre Dame are their quarterback situation is very different from a Nussmeier style quarterback. Riley Leonard, I put on Twitter and people got weirdly sensitive about that. Riley Leonard scrambling is going to drive us all crazy, because it will. Because scrambling quarterbacks.
Watching Riley Leonard scramble drove me crazy. Watching because, God, that Notre Dame offense looks ugly.
Yeah. But again, Riley Leonard's scrambling ability is an X factor that sometimes defenses just get screwed over. Angelo in the chat makes a good point. Nebraska, Dylan Raiola. By the time USC faces Dylan Raiola,
he'll be a sophomore, basically.
I mean, that Dylan Raiola might end up being the best quarterback that USC faces, but is Dylan Raiola going to be head and shoulders above of the Garrett Nussmeier that we saw today?
Who knows?
If he is, then more power to Nebraska. Well, that'll be a hell of a game.
Yeah, we will see. Charleston says that Michigan has no quarterback. Yeah, one of the things I think
Michigan needs to figure out what they're doing at quarterback, and if they don't, then again, that's another area that USC has some hope, because they need their quarterbacks. Whoever the quarterbacks are, whatever system they have in place, they need to be a hell of a lot better against than they were against Fresno State, and Texas is going to take heavy advantage of that if they come in with the same approach.
Yeah, Gillian in the chat says, does Dennis Lynch get back in the mix this week at place kicker?
I don't want to judge one missed kick. I think it says extremely small sample size.
It would have been helpful if he got the winner to feel better.
I'm glad that we didn't have to sit through that, to be honest. But I think it's you don't bench a kicker for one miss. That could be his only miss in the next 6 games. But if he starts to miss additional, then we can have a conversation.
Yeah. Last little thing before we head out here. Angry Trojan says, I still never got my stickers and decals, or decals as the Albertans would say, for signing up for Patreon back in the day. Just saying. That's Josh in Buckeye country, by the way.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, so do we have his address?
He sent us the address.
Josh.
We went to go send the thing. And then we had a Slack at the time. The history was gone, and we ended up never sending it.
Oh.
Send us a thing on Twitter or something.
Josh, email randoftroy@fansided.com with your address, or send us a DM on Twitter with your address, and we will get you many, many stickers.
Yeah, there you go. Thomas says Jesse is under the...
Jesse is laying to my...
We got no Jesse cam tonight. We were quick on the draw, trying to get up the Carcast. Lots more to talk about. We will talk later this week. Are we going? What did we talk about? Are we pushing to Tuesday? Is that what
I think
we're doing?
we said we're pushing to Tuesday.
Okay. I think we're
Because
pushing
realistically, we will not be podcasting on Monday.
Yeah, because Monday is a holiday and
Yes.
we're doing a little family barbecues. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we will be off to Tuesday. Until then, we will see you. Last little notes. I'll put a little cheers to my dad.
Hey, Mazel.
Mazel tov to my dad. My dad's getting married, folks.
Yes,
Cheers.
to a lovely woman. So we're happy.
Yeah. So, all right. We will catch you guys on Tuesday. Give us your calls, 818-643-7227. Call into the Rant Line. And until next time, we'll see you.
See ya.
See ya.